As many people will no doubt know, mysterious letters feature in some of the most infamous crime stories of all time. In many cases, such as with the Zodiac killer or Son of Sam, they are meant to taunt investigators, often warning of crimes to come. In other cases, they are sent by anonymous members of the public, either to reveal new information or to help investigators uncover new leads. And of course, many times, they are simply hoaxes, usually meant to momentarily incite public interest in a high-profile unsolved crime story. Whatever form they take, the letters themselves are usually a massive source of speculation, causing many people to obsess over their authenticity and what secrets they might reveal. Today, we wanted to take a look at a few examples of such cases, paying special attention to crimes featuring bizarre letters that are lesser known than classic examples like Jack the Ripper and the Black Dahlia murder. Before we get to our list, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. With that out of the way, here are 5 lesser-known cases involving bizarre letters. On the afternoon of August 22, 2011, Gladys Scherbey went to the home of her son Corey to check on him. Nothing could have prepared her for the scene she would encounter when she opened the door. The 38-year-old was found slumped over into his couch, his head face down in one of the cushions, and a pool of dried blood surrounding him. It had been a hot summer weekend in Chilliwack, British Columbia, and Corey had been dead for at least 2 days. Almost immediately, strange details emerged. Bloody footprints were found throughout the house, and blood was also found on the ceiling. A cardboard box was discovered in the closet with the words, "Better be a funeral" written on it. According to Corey's parents, an unknown woman had also been at the house when they last visited their son the previous Friday. Though the possibility of a homicide was initially considered by the RCMP, eventually the death was ruled accidental, caused by acute cocaine and alcohol toxicity. This again seemed to be out of character to the Sherbeys, with Corey's father later saying he, quote, "wouldn't even take an aspirin." The case only grew stranger from there, when near the end of 2011, a friend of Corey's named Tammy Bourbon approached Ed and Gladys Scherbey. Bourbon told them that their son was killed over money and drugs, but would reportedly not say anything further because she feared for her life. Bourbon would die just a few months later from blood poisoning. In 2014, the Sherbeys would receive the most bizarre tip yet, this time in the form of a typewritten letter. The letter claimed that Corey's death had resulted from, quote, "a woman scorned," and that he had waited too long to get out of a bad situation that jeopardized his well-being. The letter was signed by an anonymous reader of the Chilliwack Times. For several long years, Ed and Gladys Scherbey fought to have their son's case re-examined. In addition to the unexplained evidence found at the scene, the Sherbeys cited their own independent forensic investigator, who concluded that Corey had died as a result of homicidal smothering or strangulation. In May of 2019, they were finally successful, and an inquest date was set for April of 2020. Unfortunately for the Sherbeys, their wait would be extended once again, as COVID-19 delayed the beginning of the proceedings. For now, there are no satisfying answers to be had in the Corey Scherbey case. Even less is known about the mysterious letter writer, leaving many people baffled as to whether they indeed hold a critical piece of the puzzle or were simply executing a cruel hoax.
Before the fall of 1991, Tom Roche and Barbara Rondeau were just an average couple in Burbank, California. Barbara worked at a blueprint company and Tom was an expert in metal plating and was about to take a new job at a company that worked with aircraft parts. The pair spent much of their time riding motorcycles together, a passion in which they both shared. On Friday, September 13th, Tom dropped Barbara off at work, making plans to pick her up later for lunch. However, when he failed to show up or call, Barbara began to grow concerned. When she returned to their house several hours later, she discovered several things that confused her. Though Tom was nowhere to be found, the front door to the house was unlocked, and the newspaper had not been collected. This was strange because Tom reportedly read the sports page every day. In the kitchen, Barbara noticed that a motorcycle battery that Tom had planned to install was still sitting on the counter. The answering machine was also turned off, implying that Tom had planned to spend the day at home. After Tom failed to return or contact her that night, Barbara reported him missing. Though police initially had no concrete reason to suspect foul play, that would change in just a few days. On September 19th, Barbara received a mysterious letter. It was addressed to the family of Tom Roche. The letter contained Tom's driver's license and an earring that he had been wearing on the day of his disappearance, as well as a confession from a person claiming to be his killer. The writer said that they had met Tom at a strip club and that they had planned to meet again on the day he vanished. The letter contained no fingerprints and had no return address. It finished with the words, "I am very sorry for what I have done, and I know that in time, the guilt will leave me. So will your pain." The disturbing message prompted police to attempt to piece together Tom's activities on the day he went missing. At approximately 8:20 a.m., he made 2 deposits at his local bank without withdrawing any money. This seemed to suggest that he had no intention of leaving town. A neighbor reported seeing Tom roughly an hour later talking to an unidentified man. It was believed by many that the unknown man might be involved in the case. However, a statement from a second witness complicated matters. A man named Andy Marsala, who worked at an auto parts store frequented by Tom, told investigators that he had seen him several days after he had gone missing. Marsala claimed that Tom was behaving strangely and did not joke around with him like usual. Though authorities assume Marsala had simply gotten the date of the encounter wrong, ultimately they were not able to confirm this. With little else to guide the investigation, the search for Tom Roche soon went cold. The case would remain static until a grim discovery several months later. In January of 1992, police were called to a remote hillside in Placer County, California, 500 miles north of Burbank. At the scene, they found weathered bone fragments as well as several personal items belonging to Tom. Strangely, some of these things seemed to suggest that Tom had packed for a trip, including a duffel bag, flashlight, hunting knife, 2 pairs of prescription glasses, and extra clothes. DNA tests on the bone fragments would later confirm that they were indeed the remains of Tom Roche. It was also learned that his cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. To this day, it is unclear what events led up to Tom's strange death or who might have been behind it. Though some have speculated that he may have committed suicide, this theory also leaves several unanswered questions. Perhaps most perplexing of all, if Tom took his own life, why send a chilling letter? The case remains a bizarre mystery.
On the morning of December 6, 1983, a man's body was discovered by joggers in a vacant lot in Hialeah, Florida. The man appeared to have been strangled, and the police were quickly called to the scene. Upon closer inspection, an investigator noticed something taped to a nearby no dumping sign. It turned out to be a cryptic letter. It read, "Once you're back on track, you'll travel at night, so prepare your old self for a terrible fright. Now the motive is clear and the victim is too. You've got all the answers, just follow the clues." Though police initially had no idea what to make of the bizarre poem, the discovery of a second letter on the back of a speed sign amplified concerns, leading some to question whether they were dealing with a serial killer. The second letter read, "Yes, Matthew is dead, but his body not felt. Those brains were not Matt's, because his body did melt. For Billy threw Matt in some hot boiling oil, to confuse the police for the mystery they did toil." The investigation came to be known as the Liquid Matthew case, named for the boiling oil description in the second letter. Unsure what to make of the seemingly undecipherable clues, detectives put out a request to the public in the Sunday edition of the Miami Herald, asking anyone with information about the letters to come forward. What they got back was pretty surprising. It turned out that the strange poems were part of an annual Halloween murder mystery game, put on by several local churches. On the night in question, bad weather had prevented the organizers from collecting all of the clues they had left for participants in the game. The letters had remained unnoticed until one happened to be in the same location as the December homicide case. But the two events were completely unrelated. It was later learned that the identity of the murdered man was Francisco Patino Gutierrez, a Colombian man who had allegedly smuggled 11 pounds of cocaine into Miami before being killed by members of the local drug trade. Ultimately, the bizarre Liquid Matthew case is a reminder that sometimes seemingly indecipherable clues are indecipherable for a reason. They may offer no useful information to investigators, or may not be clues at all, but our desire to see patterns and connections can lead us down some pretty interesting rabbit holes.
On August 22, 2009, 29-year-old Toni Sharpless went out for a night of partying in downtown Philadelphia. Accompanying her was a woman named Crystal Johns, a formerly estranged friend who had recently come back into Toni's life. The pair left in Toni's black 2002 Pontiac Grand Prix at 9:30 that evening, proceeding to head to several nightclubs in the city center. After leaving the last of these clubs at 3 a.m., the two women headed to the home of professional basketball player Willie Green, as Johns was reportedly friends with his brother. Sometime after arriving at the house, Toni inadvertently insulted Green, causing her to get into an argument with a few other guests. In addition to the heavy drinking she had done that night, Toni was supposedly acting erratically, a possible side effect of her bipolar medication that was not supposed to be mixed with alcohol. She had also reportedly been awake for more than 36 hours by that point. Green told Johns it was time for her and Toni to leave, and they complied, heading back to the car. According to Johns, when she questioned whether Toni was sober enough to drive, it enraged her further, and she kicked her out of the vehicle before driving off. This would be the last time Toni Sharpless was ever seen. Investigators first decided to search the nearby Schuylkill River, suspecting that the impaired and sleep-deprived woman might have accidentally driven down a boat ramp. Unfortunately, this failed to turn up any sign of the vehicle. 2 weeks after the disappearance, an automated license plate reader recorded Toni's car entering Camden, New Jersey. This was mysterious, since Toni had almost been out of gas when she left Green's house and had brought no ATM card with her that night, meaning she would have likely been short on money. However, by the time Camden police notified investigators in the case about the hit on Toni's vehicle, more than a month had passed, and efforts to locate either her or her car were unsuccessful. Around this time, Toni's parents hired a private investigator named Eileen Law to look into her disappearance. According to Law, the testimony of several witnesses who claimed to see the missing car caused her to believe that the case was tied to the Camden area and that Toni might be in serious trouble. Law concluded that Toni must have been moved around a number of times by an unknown person or group of people, believing that she may have been the victim of a sex trafficking ring. Ultimately, however, this remained conjecture, and 3 years would pass before the next bizarre break in the case. In December of 2012, Law received a handwritten letter from an anonymous person claiming to have information about the case. The letter was postmarked in Trenton, roughly 45 minutes away from Camden. The writer claimed that they had been contacted by a friend in September of 2009 who had offered them $5,000 to transport Toni's vehicle from Brookline, New Jersey, to a chop shop in Boston. They also said that as a further reward for completing the trip, they had the option of keeping the car's license plates and Toni's social security card. The letter writer explained that the reason for Toni's disappearance was that she had gotten into a fight with a Camden police officer and had died in the encounter. The friend that had offered the money in exchange for moving the vehicle was supposedly an acquaintance of the officers. To add legitimacy to the story, the writer provided the last 5 digits of the missing Pontiac's VIN, as well as Toni's phone number. Neither of these pieces of information had ever been reported to the public. Law claims that she handed the troubling letter over to the police after receiving it, but as of 2016 claims she did not know what, if anything, investigators had done with it. Sadly, the disappearance of Toni Sharpless continues to be unsolved. The identity of the strange letter writer also remains a mystery.
In 1976, residents of Circleville, Ohio, began receiving strange letters threatening to reveal personal information about their lives. The letters were postmarked from Columbus and contained no return address. Among the recipients was a bus driver named Mary Gillespie, who was accused of having an affair with a school superintendent. At the same time, Mary's husband Ron also began receiving the strange letters. The unknown writer told him if he did not stop his wife's affair, his life would be in danger. The Gillespies only told 3 people about the threatening letters: Ron's sister, her husband Paul Freshour, and Paul's sister. Believing that they had discovered the source of the letters, Mary had Paul write a letter of his own to the suspect, claiming that he knew their identity. This seemed to work for a while, until they started back up again, this time accompanied by harassing signs placed around town. In August of 1977, Ron received a phone call from the mysterious writer. Still believing that he knew the person's identity, Ron grabbed his gun and jumped into his pickup truck. Shortly after, he was discovered dead, his vehicle found crashed into a tree. Though Ron's death was ruled an accident by the local sheriff, his family believed the details did not add up. For starters, Ron had fired at least 1 round out of his gun before the crash, though no shell casing was ever recovered. His blood alcohol level was also found to be twice the legal limit, despite his family's insistence that he was not a heavy drinker. Even with the addition of the harassing letters, the police still insisted there was no foul play involved, leading some to believe that the department had staged a cover-up. After Ron's death, Mary continued to receive the letters. This eventually escalated to threatening signs being placed next to the road along her bus route. On one such occasion in 1983, when Mary attempted to rip a sign out of the ground, she discovered it had been booby-trapped to kill her. If she had pulled the sign out a certain way, a small pistol had been rigged to fire in her direction. The gun from the trap was eventually traced back to Paul Freshour. Paul claimed that the gun had been stolen and offered an alibi for most of the day when the trap was found. However, investigators felt he could not adequately account for a key time when the device could have been placed, and charged him with attempted murder. He was convicted at trial, and though he was never charged with sending the letters, it was assumed that he had been the mysterious culprit. For Mary Gillespie, it seemed like the end of a long nightmare. However, the letters only grew more frequent and disturbing once Paul was behind bars. Even more strangely, they were still postmarked from Columbus, even though Paul was incarcerated nearly 100 miles away and was serving time in solitary confinement. Throughout his sentence, he continued to maintain his innocence and claimed that he too was receiving letters from the unknown writer. During this time, a witness also came forward and told investigators that they had seen a suspicious man in a yellow El Camino near the spot where the trap was laid for Mary Gillespie on the day of the attempted murder. They did not believe the person was Paul Freshour. In 1994, after serving 10 years in prison, Paul was released on parole. At this time, just as mysteriously as they had started, the threatening letters completely stopped. Paul would claim his innocence in both the attempted murder case and the Circleville letters case until he died in 2012, maintaining a website about the events the entire time. Though there are no concrete answers in the case, the most popular theory comes from journalist Martin Yant, who believes the Circleville letters may have been written by 3 different people, none of whom were Paul Freshour. Yant theorizes that the 3 people responsible were the son of the superintendent Mary was accused of sleeping with, a co-worker of Mary's who had been infatuated with her, and Paul Freshour's wife. All 3 of these people reportedly had a motive for sending the threatening letters. In the case of the superintendent's son, it appears that the rumors of the affair involving Mary Gillespie were true. The boy was likely bothered by the relationship and thought the letters might bring an end to it. Yant believes Mary's co-worker was motivated by her rejection of his sexual advances and wrote some of the letters in revenge. As for Paul Freshour's wife, the couple had divorced in 1983, and Paul had gotten sole custody of the children. Though Yant's theory has never been confirmed, it does offer an explanation for the sheer volume of letters that were sent over the years, as well as an account of why the Gillespie family in particular was targeted. However, we may never know the true identity of the person or people behind the mysterious Circleville letters. That brings us to the end of our list. Are there any other stories like this that you'd like to see covered in a future video? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. Thank you for watching.